Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 22nd. Of course, yesterday, no big shock. We already could see where things were heading. Nice support, though, at the 23%. But clearly, we've got DOC here with orange moving in between and continued weak shakeout. Now we're actually going to be at a lower shakeout. But the run isn't done with. So, we were talking about the potential that eventually, if you had higher shakeout reading with, higher low than the previous one, but the lower shakeout, you would end up with a divergence developing. But as we pointed out, we clearly aren't at that stage just yet, but that also meant that we were in this continuation of decline. And we were looking at the intraday charts, and it was clear that we were going to be heading lower. And the speed of which is always faster than you get typically with your rise. We're already seeing it come back within that move already. And again, just shaking weaker hands. But all of this is really predicated on the battle between Trump and the Fed. They are completely divergent. And it's an interesting one because it's not something the Fed really needs to take on the fight for. It really wouldn't make any difference, but they're choosing to. They were much more supportive during Biden when it came to easing rates, even though inflation was out of control. You don't have that situation at this particular time, but you know that there's getting liquidity squeeze with the trade situation, and they clearly don't agree with that policy, and they're going to do everything they can to hamper it. And so far, they're doing just that. From an NQ standpoint, of course, you can see the short interest has dropped off dramatically. So that should be a removal of a lot of the strain going into this. But you still have to have new buyers to come in and lift things up. And that's where things have been a little bit soft. So, here we are returning all the way back to, and this is again this slow. I call it the Chinese drip water torture here. They're just going to continue to sell treasuries into it and lower yield and continue to create little turmoil there. Of course, there's a limit to how much they can do and what they can get away with. And of course, the U.S. is going to continue to try and soak up. And now, will the Fed cooperate and actually buy any of that extra liquidity on the market as far as the selling of treasuries? Well, we'll see. That's going to be the real ultimate question. Because if they don't, you're going to continue to see that yield drop. And then you're going to have this disparity between the Fed rate and what Treasury's selling at, and it gets complicated. But no help here with the oil. I mean, just back and forth. Again, this becomes your real predicate as to how things shift through the economy quickly, and it becomes your number one focal point as to how fast things can change, and it just hasn't been quick enough. It's had some help, but every time there's been a slight move, uh, you get a resurgence back in it. So problematic as far as growth issues go, and that's just huge impetus for the euro, which is kind of ironic given the situation that's taking place. But it's this repatriation of money. People are afraid of what's going to happen with the tariff situation. Fear is a potent weapon when it comes to the markets because fear causes exuberance in defensive areas, and you're seeing that with gold. I mean, this is a continuation of it. I wouldn't call it skyrocketing. It's exactly what we expected. In fact, we think it's been delayed overall, given where things have been at. It's a long way to catch up with where inflation was from a year ago. But needless to say, it's making that continued move and still fairly strong from that standpoint, reaching a point of probably a little bit too much exuberance, but it'll just blend in one of these little sections, and then you'll have another wave that'll go. And then again, it's going to be tied to what begins to happen with oil and what we start to see for actual growth numbers coming forward. The real question is how long can China hold out? Probably quite a long time. But then again, so can the U.S. because it really doesn't matter from a U.S. standpoint whether or not China is trading with the U.S. because there are other goods that can be purchased despite it. Now you get into more complicated things when you talk about rare earths and all these other little specialty items, but Trump's not stupid. They're making accommodations to adjust within that, but the pressure is still there. So that's the key element. But now Bitcoin getting a little bit of a bounce from this, moving forward, and this is some of the world news. Other countries taking the opportunity to allow Bitcoin to be used for taxes and payments and things, and that's that kind of mainstream movement. And it looks like it's happening from the third world first. That may be the shift of Bitcoin towards a more mainstream use, but you can see shakeout moving positive on that, so it's not going to stop. And if you get a buoyancy in the market at any point, that could help drive it very quickly. ETH not quite sharing in the same thing. And we talked about the disparity between the two growing now in that utility aspect. So this is what we saw yesterday as I was making the report and everything. We had the two MBI white spikes. Bit of a weakness, but it didn't create enough of a move there when we only got to the 23%. So there was another secondary run. And right as that got to the 50%, MBI white clearly over. Magenta was below 33. And as soon as it broke below yellow, that was the clear signal. And, the short sale setup began with that. And then you can see we were expecting a move to the 0+, because at that point, MBI white was already still leading even before we had gotten to the 0, and it didn't stop all the way through until late in the session there, and you get this classic maneuver where the MBI magenta takes over white and begins to lead, and that's your signal right there at the 0. Get out and be prepared for the up push. Some could wait till the 23%. It's just a question of your preference at that point. I like taking the nice win for that, and then boom. Once we hit the 23%, the magenta is still leading. Now MBI white following, so you get shorts adding into this as it goes up towards the 50%. That's why it's faded off just a little bit, and so you'll end up with another MBI white spike midway in between this, and that may happen post open or just before. But here's the key in there: DOC, the green diverging from cyan, meaning the bulls have this one in hand at this particular stage. So we'll see if they're able to hold that on there, because magenta will need to stay in the elevated area for an extended time if you're expecting that to create a breakout from there. When we look at it from an even tighter 5-minute, it was pretty straightforward. There wasn't anything. It was just straight liquidation, and it's just that fear trade coming through. Nothing beyond that, because there's no real readings coming off of the Easter holiday, other than the Pope dying, but I don't know that that's such a impetus. But it will be interesting, because now Trump will be going to Rome and that. So where else will he go if he's already in Europe? That will become an interesting question. Here we are in the European session, and it's all rosy from that standpoint. Everyone taking advantage of the cheaper price. So there you have it, the long and the short of it. As things get more complicated, they're still getting more resolved, in the sense that we can see that it's just a matter of where the numbers are going to start to trail out and who's right. And that really is the question that everybody has. Those who bet on tariffs being inflationary, and those who say it doesn't make any sense. It could be, but doesn't have to be. Yeah, and that battle is going to continue. It's going to take months for it to resolve, and they're still not going to agree even when you don't see inflation. So just take that for what it is. As always, though, anything relevant, I'll put in the Skype chat. I posted that 50K chart the other day before we started the continued selling, and worked out perfectly. So have a good one.